I try to use alliteration in my poetry as a way of matching thematic links with sonic links, as a way of using form as function to show the connections between the words and concepts, especially since so much of the manuscript deals with the narrator being unable to adhere to expected standards. I want the breaking away from alliteration and repetition to be as significant as the repetition itself, to reflect the narrator being unable to adhere to what people expect them to do. Seahorse is meant to be a mixture of my thoughts on artistic creation and on gender. Gender wise, it's a reflection of my rejection of the idea of gender as being limiting in how someone should act or what they're able to do, especially when it comes to being nurturing or being compassionate. I use repetition in my poetry as a means of having form very literally correspond with the content. In this manuscript, especially, a lot of the events I describe are things that I've gone through multiple times beyond just what the poems describe, things that gay people get asked a lot or things they get put through frequently, which creates a sense of tiredness and frustration. And part of me using repetition throughout the manuscript so much is that the literal events that the manuscript is based on repeat themselves so much, and using repetition is a strategy I have to try and sort of emulate that sense of emotional tiredness. My endings to my poems are something I spend a lot of time working on, because I never want a reader to walk away feeling disappointed or like a piece got worse at the very end. And I also tend to use them as a space where I really reinforce the point or the aim of the poem, because while playing with ambiguity can be effective here or there, I also think there's something to be said for just stating things plainly and making your meaning clear. would say it's a little bit of all of the above. The poems are essentially meant to be autobiographical because part of the point of the collection is to give people a sort of glimpse into my life and my point of view. But in order to make things clear for someone else, sometimes I have to step back and edit things slightly for clarity or remove certain details. It's like writing a diary when you know someone else is going to read it. Thank you. The project's original version was about twice as long, but the editors and I trimmed it down for a couple of reasons. One, just physically, it would be a lot easier to fit the shorter manuscript inside of the bottle format that we're using, but also narrative cohesion, I think, has improved because a lot of what was in the manuscript before that we cut was more tangentially related. So now the poems included feel much more closely aligned with each other, and I'm very happy with it as a short, completed work. That's a good question and a multifaceted one. There's definitely pressure on members of minority groups to sort of be the voice. You're either the gay one or whatever the case may be. Personally, I prefer to replace the word the with a. I don't try to speak for the LGBT community because no one person can do that. I just want my poems to be an example of one type of experience, and if reading them can give someone a sort of insight through which they can begin to feel more open-minded and have a better idea about possibilities of other type of experiences, then I would be happy with that. I've definitely pondered those things before, but ultimately everything I've had published I would defend as just being reflective of the human experience. When talking about sexuality and sexual identity, you're pretty inherently talking about bodies, regardless of the degree of explicitness to which you do so. So, from my perspective, why shy away from talking about the physical body as a and why tiptoe around it when you could just get to the truth of the matter? There's no need to feel shame talking about it or to ignore it, because gay people are largely hated and humiliated because they have feelings and urges that people deem wrong or unnatural because of the bodies they inhabit. And you can't really talk about homophobia or dealing with it without talking about gay people's bodies and their experiences with their bodies and how they defy expectations for how the bodies should be used. A large part of my fascination with the ocean largely has to do with my childhood experiences in Hawaii, specifically at the beaches on Oahu and Kauai. And aside from that, part of my love for the ocean and imagery, especially in these poems, has to do with connections I make between the ocean and concepts of homosexuality. The ocean, of course, is of the natural world. It is nature. And one of the main things that people who hate homosexuals say is that they are not natural, that their urges are not natural. But of course, homosexuality is natural, and there's nothing unnatural about two people of the same sex loving each other or feeling sexual attraction for each other. So I tend to incorporate nature imagery, and specifically oceanic themes, when talking about homosexuality, as a means of rejecting this idea of gay people as being things that don't fit into the natural order. And with the ocean specifically, there is both that sense of acceptance, that rejection of shame, nature as good, but then there's also the fear of the ocean, the dangers of the ocean. You can drown in it. Humans don't fully understand or know all of its depths. And with sexuality, it can be confusing or feel threatening based upon the danger that the culture around you might put you in if your sexuality does not adhere to societal standards. So I use the ocean as a sort of metaphor for being gay because it can not only reinforce and be a positive symbol of being gay as just a natural facet of identity, but it can also be a means of addressing the fears and the dangers that come with being gay in a space that is not accepting of that. I've thought about this question, and I'm not sure I can give a specific answer to it. Part of why I make all my writing so explicit, so blunt, direct, and the way I talk about gay issues, gay people, gay concerns, is I know how important it is for gay people to see themselves represented in stories and media because we usually aren't. So I would send a copy of this to any gay person who has no one to talk to about their experiences, about what they're feeling. And I would hope that even though the collection talks a lot about painful things that people could relate to, I'd also like to think that it contains some slivers of hope and a sense of joy to gay experience, and that it doesn't just chronicle all of the many negative aspects.